So lately I've been watching a lot of Jordan Peterson lectures, and if you're somebody who listens to the works of Jordan Peterson, you know that he uses a lot of biblical references in his videos. I first noticed this when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said something along the lines of
the New Testament line about that, something about, not worrying too much about the log in your neighbor's eye, or about the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your eye.
At first, I didn't know what he meant by that, but turns out it's a verse in the Old Testament, which means that you shouldn't try to fix up other people before you fixed yourself up. And that's actually a rule in 12 Rules for Life. Set your house in order before you criticize the world. So it turns out that there's a lot more interpretations and a lot more references that can be applied in real life and can be used for the purpose of self-improvement as well.
Go somewhere you don't understand. That's the first thing. Get thee out of thy country. Back in the 1920s, there was a whole slew of American writers who ended up as expatriates in Paris, Hemingway among them, and who wrote The Great Gatsby. Fitzgerald, yes, and then a variety of others. It was very inexpensive in Paris at the time, and part of their transformation into great literary figures was the fact that they were out of their country, and now they could see what their country was, because you can't see what your country is until you leave it. So you have to go into the unknown, and that's God's first command. Go into the unknown, because you already know what you know. And that's not enough unless you think you're enough. And if you're not enough and you don't think you're enough, then you have to go where you haven't been. Go to where you don't know. Yes. And from thy kindred. Well, what does that mean? It means grow up, right? That's what it means. It means get away from your family enough so that you can establish your independence.
Now, some countries have this whole culture of moving out, but I don't think that's what he meant. I think what it means symbolically is to establish yourself independently or put yourself in a position where you can carry your own weight. Another very good thing to mention, I think Jordan Peterson also says that you should put yourself in a position where your parents should rely on you instead of, the reverse.
So I tell people, do it haphazardly, a tiny bit at a time, and badly. The fool is the precursor to the Savior. Why? Because you're a fool when you start something new. And so if you're not willing to be a fool, then you'll never start anything new. And if you never start anything new, then you won't develop. And so the willingness to be a fool is the precursor to transformation. And that's the same as humility. And so if you're going to write your destiny, you can do a bad first job. You're going to get smarter as you move forward.
When I first made my CV, it wasn't as appealing as it should be, and it was looking very amateurish, if I'm being honest. It wasn't looking very decent. But it's only when I did the appropriate research and I asked my classmates how a proper resume is made, I came to know that there's so many different styles, so many different formats that you should use. And I also came to know that you should actually tailor your resume according to the job you're applying for. But I think the lesson here is that if I went in there with a perfectionistic attitude, I have to get it right the first time, I wouldn't have made mistakes, and more importantly, I wouldn't have learned from them. So I think Jordan Peterson is right. You have to be willing to be a fool in advance before you master a new skill.
A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. Part of spiritual development is to recognize the tendencies that characterize you and to fully wrestle with them and to integrate them. That's the thing. It's not so much to cast them away. It's to transmute them. And you can see the difference between people who've done that and people who haven't, at least to some degree, because people who haven't integrated the shadow at all are naive. And you can tell that when you look at them, and you can tell that when you talk to them. And because they're naive, they're often resentful as well because they get taken advantage of. And someone who's integrated that more, they're dangerous in the martial arts sort of way, which is they're dangerous, but they don't have to be
They don't have to use it because their presence radiates the potential for havoc.
One of the key things that you learn in martial arts is discipline. You learn all these techniques and you learn all these techniques and methods which can be used to harm somebody, which can be used to inflict pain upon somebody, but the sole purpose of learning these things is to utilize them only during self-defense. And that can be related to the techniques that you learn in the military during combat wars. The sole purpose of learning those techniques and those skills, combat skills, is to protect and defend the country during times of danger or during times of emergency. So that's what Jordan Peterson meant. You should be capable of violence, you should be capable of inflicting pain, but you should do it with the good in mind.
You know how the modern idea is you're supposed to accept yourself. I think that's an insane idea, by the way. Really, I can't think of a more nihilistic idea than that you're already okay. It's like, no, you're not. And the reason you're not is because you could be way more than you are. And so what do you want to be? You want to be okay as you are? Or do you want to strive towards what's better?
Your best strategic interest is to identify how insufficient you are and how you can rectify that, because if we simply identify our bad habits and try to correct them, then we'll turn into someone who's highly efficient, and I feel that is a correct pathway towards self-actualization. If you just accept yourself the way you are and don't put in efforts daily to improve yourself, then I would say that's a recipe for disaster, because you should constantly be trying to improve yourself every single day, even if it's 1%, but you have to admit that you're somebody who needs work and you need to improve.
People think that the purpose of memory is to remember the past, and that's not the purpose of memory. The purpose of memory is to extract out from the past lessons to structure the future. So if you have a traumatic memory, for example, that's really obsessing you, if you analyze that memory to the point where you figured out how you put yourself at risk and you can determine how you might avoid that in the future, then the emotion associated with that goes away.
Now I'm pretty sure all of us have had some bad memories in the past that that were embarrassing, that were traumatic. But if we simply analyze what we've done wrong or what puts us at risk and try to avoid that in the future, then the negative feeling associated with that goes away. So you can say we can use the past as a guide to structure the future.